When they explained to me what my job would be, I was quite ecstatic. I had never in my life even visited a hotel, and now I was chosen as one of the few lucky ones who would help to create a welcoming home for all the visitors that would soon be in our town. The tea was specifically designed to make you feel as if you were walking around in a dream, slightly cloudy with soft lights and muffled sounds. Everything was a bit different. For example, the door frames were all of slightly different sizes and colors. The stairs that lead to each floor appeared to never end until you suddenly found yourself at a different number. There was a glass elevator in the middle of the lobby, which only very few were allowed to use. I wasn't one of them. Most walls were painted in a light lavender shade, but others were black. There were phone cords leaving each room that disappeared between walls, but all somehow ended up at the reception. I'm not really sure how that worked, but it did look fascinating and odd at the same time. There were 27 phone cords and 27 room keys. However, my favorite part of the interior was all the different lamps that we got from one special shop out of town. Every single room had its own unique lamp. I believed I was the luckiest girl in town for getting to work at the shiny new thing we had. Even more, I was thrilled to meet visitors. We didn't get those very often, or to be more correct, mostly never. Our town was very secluded, though I already had a lingering feeling that I would regret my anticipation soon enough. Being happy in that town is a choice, one that you have to pay for with obedience. That was never one of my strong suits. You're here for everything and everyone, but only after I ask, or if it ever happens, the owner. But mostly you only listen to me, got it? Those were some of the first words Marjorie said to me. Marjorie was basically my boss, except not really. She ran the whole place, took care of everything, and knew everyone. If you saw her full cherry hair, her athletic body, and her tiny skirts, you'd never believe that she was already 76. The young girl at the reception is Judy. She's 17 or 18. Like you, she just finished school. During night shifts, we replace her with Jacob. Twins. Kinda creepy. She whispered the last word. Judy waved hesitantly and smiled as we walked past her. You can chat later, but not too much. We kept racing through the hotel as she explained the most basic things. How to make a bed, how to clean a bathroom, how to change a light. I am showing you these things so you can prepare today. When our guests arrive, however, you will not go to their rooms. They must stay quarantined. You will not open one door until I tell you to again. After hours of Marjorie telling me everything I wasn't allowed to do, I still had to prepare 24 rooms. At 8 a.m., I was sent home, exhausted but also sad. The guests were supposed to arrive at night, and I would miss it. My second shift started the very next day at precisely 6 p.m. The sun was slowly going down as I walked through the narrow, cobblestone alleys of the town, past all the shops which were getting ready to close for the day. Most shop owners had made posters and signs to invite people inside. They'd been told there would be tourists, after all, but nobody had left their rooms, and they weren't going to for a while. The lobby was empty except for one person. Judy was standing at the reception, her chin resting on her hand, as she was doodling something on a piece of paper. She looked up and smiled when she saw me. Hey, Emma. I looked at the wall behind her. Yesterday it was full of keys. For some reason, my heart started beating faster. Are all the rooms booked out? I asked. She nodded. Every single one, and all for at least 3 weeks. Jacob checked them all in last night apparently, which makes my job today pretty dull. I leaned closer to her table and whispered, even though nobody else was around. Did he say something? What were they like? She shrugged. He said they were all polite and pleasant, a bit different than us but perfectly friendly, she said, raising her voice. Then she leaned in closer and whispered, but I know he was lying. How? Judy looked around nervously. I always know when he's lying. He raises his chin, and the tone of his voice changes. But that's not all. She pulled out a piece of paper underneath the one she was doodling on. There were drawings of a bunch of different people. They all looked unique. Some were tall, some were wide, and some dressed in a specific way. But they all had one thing in common. They had no faces. I remembered what Marjorie had said about the twins. Does he draw things like this often? Emma, Marjorie's loud voice surprised us. She was at the bottom of the staircase, but I hadn't even heard her walk down. Judy quickly hid the piece of paper. The sound of Marjorie's heels echoed through the entire lobby As she walked up to us, my body stiffened, and I suddenly felt as if I was in trouble. Marjorie looked at her watch. You're 5 minutes early. You know you don't get paid for that, right? Never mind, she interrupted me. I have a task for you, a very important one that I don't trust anyone else with. Follow me. They walked into the kitchen where Hugo was cooking something with a tangy but unfamiliar smell. Hugo, who was 30 years younger than Marjorie, but actually looked her real age, was the kitchen chef. He looked the toughest, but was probably the nicest guy in the hotel. One of our guests had a very specific wish. Normally, they all receive their meals at the same time, but this gentleman is special. When he has a wish, we're supposed to fulfill it. Marjorie spoke in a strict tone. So I'm sending you to his room. You will knock on the door twice, and when he tells you to enter, you will. He will place the tray that Hugo prepared on his desk. You will not talk to the guest. Can you do that? I nodded. Good. The guest lives in room 11. Marjorie left the kitchen, and I waited for Hugo to finish the tray. She's testing you. Wants to see if you can be trusted. You better do exactly what she says, or she'll fire you, he whispered. I swallowed. Yeah, I know. We both knew what that meant. Being fired is taken quite literally around here. I took a deep breath before I knocked on the door of room 11. After my second knock, a deep voice whispered enter. With the tray on one arm, I opened the door slowly. The sight of the man inside was so strange that I froze on the spot. He was sitting by the window, looking at it but not out of it. The blinds were shut, and the only light came from the lamp on the nightstand next to his bed. I couldn't tell you how old the man was, but his clothes made me assume that he wasn't young. He was dressed in an uncomfortable-looking checkered brown suit and wearing a hat made out of the same fabric. Without turning around, he pointed towards the table in the middle of the room. I tried not to shake too much as I quickly walked over to put down the silver tray. On the table, I saw a small box filled to the brim with keys. Room keys. I didn't want to stay inside the room longer than I needed to. It felt suffocating there. I was ready to leave again. But then the man began to speak. I smell a lot of death in this town. I stayed quiet. They are not educating the people enough. If they keep murdering all the residents, this hotel will have to grow exponentially. Slowly he turned around his head, and I saw that he was wearing bandages all around his face. There was a slit cut in where his mouth would be. I opened my mouth, but before I could speak, I felt a hand around my arm, pulling me outside. The door shut, and I realized it was Marjorie. He did well, girl. He seems to like you. My breath was fast and sharp. I wanted to ask so many questions, but my fear took me over. I've lived here my whole life. Fear is the first thing they teach us. We know we can't leave this place and do everything we can to live a decent life. My parents have never asked a critical question, and they were the happiest people I know. Marjorie walked me down the hall. When we reached the staircase, she smiled and hugged me. It was the first time she seemed human. The man you met wasn't a regular guest. He is the owner of this hotel. We do everything he says. Many people I knew changed after they got their first job. They lost something inside of them, a glimpse of innocence. We do what we're told because we must. What other option is there? And the other guests? I asked, making sure to stay as vague as possible. They are not guests. They are our new neighbors. Well, soon they will be. They are here to acclimate first. Until then, they must stay undisturbed. I simply nodded, something I learned to do quite often. Mindlessly, I made my way back to the lobby. Luckily, Marjorie had no more tasks for the moment. She gave me a moment to calm down. At the reception, Judy was replaced by Jacob. Night had come and her shift was over. Jacob didn't greet me. He stayed silent, listening to something that I wouldn't be able to get out of my ears or mind. There were sounds coming from the telephone, carried through the cords of the rooms. They were crying for help. Jacob and I looked at each other, hopeless and empty, because we both knew that there was nothing we could do. They had to accept their fates just like everyone else here. All I wanted was to get out and leave, but unfortunately, in Tattletale, quitting your job was not an option.